Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We have some breaking news. This is important. The Saved by the Bell reboot is on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
The original cast members will be reunited. Yeah,
okay.
thank you very much.
Or are they going to do it during one of this? When are they planning? Have they already shot it? Is it in the can? Or are they going to do this virtually through Zoom?
You haven't been in my well-appointed condo, but if you had, you would know that it's decorated like the Max.
Oh.
So they could actually, if they want to, they could actually film it in my place, and I'd love to have the gang over.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to have a little one-on-one with Mario Lopez.
And Kelly Kapowski can sit
Yeah.
next to me. I don't even recognize her name in real life. I just recognize her character name. All right, so that's the important news. Now we'll get back to COVID-19 related matters. Something about modeling.
Oh.
The modeling, including the models that have been given the most profile. The basis for the decisions that have been made. Like, for example, that University of Washington model and the modeler Chris Murray over there. Carl Bergstrom is a biology professor at the University of Washington, and he has a really good Twitter thread critiquing the model.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting here because what you're having now, and we'll play a local example of this, is politicians saying, yeah, these models were way off. Thanks to me. The hospitalization numbers are way under the projections. The death totals are way under the projections. Thanks to me.
Yeah. Well, Mayor Lightfoot, she did that yesterday. She's like, thanks to what I've decided to do, have you stay in place, 2,000 people would be dead. Listen to this.
If we had continued on that path, we would be looking at upwards of 2,000 deaths and over 62,000 cases today.
That's just obscene. She has no idea. There's no basis for that.
I know.
And the numbers that she stated yesterday and the numbers that she stated from the beginning, she won't show her work like you have to do in grade school in order to get credit.
She stood by a chart, but there was no source on the chart. You know what I'm saying?
So going back to Bergstrom and this IHME model, the basic story that the IHME model, the Washington model, is laying out is a story in which we initially have an epidemic that's taking off, then control measures are put in place, and the epidemic is brought under control with only about 3% of the population infected. But this is a mix of two different processes, an acceleration phase prior to control and a deceleration phase once controls are in place. And what happens in the model is you force the back end to fit a preordained curve. Just talking about what's happening at the state-by-state level versus the global level. And he looks at the projections and predictions that the model makes for Washington State versus the actual trajectory. The actual trajectory tracks the forecast pretty closely, but then starts to turn around. Once that happens, the backside of the curve is constrained to mirror the front side. The epidemic is predicted to wane quickly. By May 17th, the uncertainty range collapses to 0 deaths, just as we reported IHME revised down their projected deaths for July and August to zero nationally. Nationally, 0.
Ooh.
We were at 800,000 at one point in time. Now we're down to 0.
How does that happen?
Well, because of exactly what Professor Bergstrom is talking about with how the model is set up. And he goes on to say this back-end curvature, the backside of the curve being constrained to mirror the front side, that strikes me as unrealistic. Even ignoring the real-world coupling between states, which is not included in the model, I'm not persuaded that the epidemic will necessarily be entirely finished in just over a month. It depends on what the R0 is, and so on and so forth. Other criticisms along this line bring up the same point. The problem with the IHME model, why it's so bad and why it's been so inaccurate, it's very simple top-down curve fitting. And so it doesn't contemplate real-world contingencies. And actually, so the more that you feed in real-world data, the more inaccurate the model becomes. And that was also found by researchers at University of Chicago and Northwestern, where they found that as you get more real-world data, the model gets more inaccurate, which is an indictment of the model. Why does this all matter? Just so a bunch of eggheads can talk about modeling? No, because the policymakers are making decisions and continue to make decisions based on ticker interpretations and what these models project, so that, and they're doing so, I think, in a craven way, too, in part, so they can do what you just heard Lori Lightfoot do. Here's what the model said, and I'm going to use the model that predicted n times, and because we've come in at n times minus x, that's because of me. You can congratulate me. You can thank me for saving your life. I mean, it's really
saving the lives of thousands of others, she says, at this point.
It is really unseemly business, preying on people's fears and ignorance like that. And I think that's what's happening. But let's get an expert opinion. Joining us again, Dr. Michael Lewis, board certified and fellow of the American College of Preventative Medicine and American College of Nutrition. He's also the developer of the Essence program. That is the nation's first and largest syndrome-based disease outbreak recognition system used by every health department across the United States, many countries around the world. He's the author of When Brains Collide, What Every Athlete and Parent Should Know About the Prevention and Treatment of Concussions and Head Injuries. Someday we'll be able to talk to him about the When Brains Collide concussion issue about sports when we start playing them again. Dr. Lewis, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
So,
talking about models, what about all the models for the rates of concussions? Apparently they're all out the window now too, aren't they?
well, I mean, yeah, right. The real world has interceded, right? Well,
thanks to Mayor Lightfoot, of course.
Yeah, again, right. All those concussions she prevented. You're welcome, Dr. Lewis. You're welcome. So what about this though? And the point I've tried to rinse and repeat. It's not just about trying to play gotcha with academics. The problem is they're this inaccurate, and this is the basis for policy decisions.
Well, models are just that. I mean, if you really want to take a chance, you could fly a model airplane across the country, but I would suggest maybe taking a real thing, So, models are only as good as the information you feed into them and, how good they're designed. And, we talk about the Essence program I designed 20 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's always, if you're putting garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. It's kind of a basic concept of computer systems is garbage in, garbage out. So what are you feeding into these models makes just as much of a difference as the actual quality of the model itself, which, if we had great models, everybody'd be rich because we'd be playing the stock market.
There's something else, too. It's, what we're learning in real time about this disease, because one of the other throwaway lines from politicians is, hey, listen to the doctors, listen to the scientists. Okay, well, the doctors are learning some things, too, since this is a novel coronavirus, and so are the scientists, and not everybody agrees, and people equally credentialed are coming to different conclusions and frankly, providing different insights. There's a study out of China from some Hong Kong-based researchers that finds something very interesting with respect to the orders that have been handed down at the state and local levels. They looked at outbreaks, 318 outbreaks, categories of outbreaks. And what they find is that all identified outbreaks of 3 or more cases occurred in an indoor environment. All identified outbreaks of 3 or more cases occurred in an indoor environment. In point of fact, we identified only a single outbreak in an outdoor environment, which involved 2 cases in all the cases they look at, which basically confirms that the spread is mostly among family or people living in the same space, and and indoors. So these you can't go to a park, you can't walk on the lakefront, you can't play golf, is without scientific basis, arguably.
Well, even worse than that is the scientific basis really would say quite the opposite. Is fresh air and sunshine, are going to have tremendous benefit to people, not just the absence of an outbreak. And it's going to keep people healthier. So if you got people getting outside, getting fresh air, and exercising, wouldn't that make sense that that's going to actually help people's immune system stay stronger?
Yep.
So when they are indoors, they're less susceptible to getting ill from this virus or any virus.
Well, Doctor, do you think it's irresponsible for these presumed deaths? I mean, they're just saying in New York, they said, anyone who died at home, anybody who died on the street, anybody who died in a nursing home, we'll just blop them in as COVID-19 victims.
Well, I think that is a failure of the larger public health system, both at the local level and at the national and even international level. I've not actually heard a good case definition of what somebody is with this COVID-19, and that's how do you even start to collect numbers when you don't even have a case definition to tell you exactly what is a case? So, how New York is counting might be very different than how Miami's counting versus Chicago or LA. I mean, it's really kind of, people forgot to go back to, look at the basic epidemiology 101 of how to even do this, it seems.
Yeah, how do you think the profession of epidemiology is faring under scrutiny with respect to so many of these individuals producing and flacking for these models?
Well, I think politics are getting in the way of a lot of things. You keep talking about how politics interplays with this, and I think epidemiologists, just like any other profession, they want to think that they're doing their profession and doing it well and academically, and I think that one of the things that they have also underestimated is the interplay with politics. We like to think we're academic and we're doing the right thing, but in reality, when the politicians get involved, or when epidemiologists start playing politicians and vice versa, that's that's when the waters get pretty muddy.
Well,
Dr. Lewis, you're at ground zero for SARS and for bird flu. And how is COVID-19 different than both of those?
Well, it's different in a couple of ways. One is that it was caught much earlier on, and for a variety of reasons. It really kind of happened through Hong Kong, spread into Hanoi, and went out to the world from there. But you have to realize that Hong Kong had just become under the control of the Chinese. It was still very, very independent. The British had controlled Hong Kong for many, many years. And so there was a lot more transparency. So they were able to understand that, hey, this is new, this is deadly. We need to grab a hold of this. Versus now, out of Wuhan, this thing burned through Wuhan and probably big parts of China for potentially weeks, even months, with absolutely no transparency. And then you've got the winter holidays where you have millions of people, by some accounts, that were traveling internationally from the Wuhan area to around the world. And so the lack of transparency by the Chinese government just allowed this to escape much greater, much quicker around the world. And that's just accounting for the concept of travel. It's not even accounting for the fact that people were traveling and they're not feeling ill for maybe even a week, while there's actually have the virus and spreading it.
As somebody who's developed a disease outbreak recognition system, what do you make of President Trump's freeze on WHO funding and openly questioning if the organization can be reformed such that America should continue to support it, or as some scholars are arguing, even at present, that it cannot be reformed and that America needs to come up with a new bilateral, multilateral organization to do world health?
Well, I think that it serves, WHO serves a good purpose when they actually do their job and when they're not being subjected to the lack of leadership that they have currently and the controlling of the Chinese government of the leadership. I mean, China, puts in about $30 million into the operating budget of WHO, whereas the U.S. is putting in $300 or $400 million, and yet we don't seem to have any say at the leadership level, and leadership seems to be pretty closely tied in with China. Everything I'm seeing, reading, hearing really worries me about what the Chinese government has done from the very beginning. And one of the things people aren't talking about is, this research lab in Wuhan that it's now coming out that this is probably a virus that escaped out of a lab. Guess who funded that lab?
WHO.
The National Institute of Health, NIAID, headed by Tony Fauci. So nobody's talking about making this connection.
Very interesting. And Tony Fauci is currently talking about whether or not you should use dating apps. Dr. Michael Lewis, board certified and a fellow of the American College of Preventive Medicine and American College of Nutrition, developer of the Essence program, which we were just referencing, the nation's first and largest syndrome-based disease outbreak recognition system used by every health department across the United States, many countries around the world, as well as the author of When Brains Collide, what every athlete and parent should know about the prevention and treatment of concussions and head injuries. Dr. Lewis, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you.
Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer.